Chair, let me extend my thanks as well. I can't imagine how many sleepless nights you've had over the past few months, and we appreciate it. You're the defenders of freedom in this country, and we're here to try to help and support the best we can. I'm going to kind of go through a few things, comments before I have my question. First, let me just say my own personal opinion. We know this ultimately is going to be the decision of Ukraine and their leadership, but I don't think that the Russians should be allowed to have an inch of territory in that country. I just don't think we can reward this kind of behavior. And I know it's clearly more complicated than that, but I think it's important that you know where we stand. To get to some of the issues Ms. Kaptur brought up around the mental health. Having worked on these issues for a long time, and Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the suicide issue, which is pervasive across our society now. One of the recommendations I would give is, and we've been trying to work on this, how do you evaluate people who are coming into the military? One of the more recent analyses of this issue is around adverse childhood experiences, where people coming into the military are bringing trauma from their childhood. Could be multiple adverse childhood experiences, but in each one of these experiences, it increases your rates of depression, increases your rates of mental health issues, increases your rates of suicide. So I think if you're going to go at this thing, really trying to get some knowledge about the person before they even step foot in the military, and that'll help, I think, begin to try to address some of those issues. I also want to mention having more of a whole of government approach. You look at the problems that we have now in Eastern Europe. A lot of this is because of the energy issue and the over-reliance on Russia for oil and gas. And I think a whole of government approach. We have gas in Eastern Ohio, Western PA, Utica Shale, Marcellus Shale. How do we build the infrastructure to get this gas, liquid natural gas or whatever it is, out of Eastern Ohio to Eastern Europe? And having a you know, obviously not necessarily a short-term solution, but a mid to long-term solution to help our allies in Europe be more reliant on American energy than on Vladimir Putin, which could, I think, you know, knock the legs out from under him. Lastly, and Ms. Kaptur brought this up too, and she mentioned it around the issue of food. And, you know, it may seem like an ancillary issue in the military, but we've seen from recent studies, multiple studies showing increased rates of obesity, increased rates of diabetes in the military. Now, a few years ago, I sat on the VA committee, right? So we're seeing, like, what are we feeding our troops when they're active? And now we have obesity and diabetes when they go to the VA, which is driving up costs. And I've been working on this issue for a couple years, and we've had the Army make promises about a campus dining pilot, the Air Force Academy, which in good faith they got shut down because of the pandemic. But the superintendent there promised to resume the program. Air Force promised to expand their Food 2.0 modernization to Food 3.0. None of these services mentioned fulfilled their assurances. Navy and Marine Corps did not break any promises because they haven't made any promises. But to me, when you see the recently published report on the military food system, the GEO found that each services abysmally managed its food systems. And I just think this is something that, it's so complicated. My staff brought me a flow chart of how the food system works in the military. It's insane. I mean, there's so much, it's dry, you know, there's no flow. And I just want to be very clear, this is not a food, this is a food management and operations problem. This isn't a nutrition problem. Everybody knows what we should be eating. I mean, it's pretty common knowledge. So in 22, Mr. Secretary, we passed legislation recommending the formation of a food transformation cell, within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And if you could just tell us, you know, what the status is of that cell, and how you can assure us that as we move towards food transformation, there's not going to be more broken promises. I think this is a very important issue for us to save money that we can then put into, you know, a lot of these other programs.
Mr. Secretary, once again, I'll give you a few extra moments here to answer the question.
Thank the chair for her generosity.
Well, thanks, sir. First of all, let me thank you for your interest in this and the work that you've done in the past. And I would like to say that I share your concerns on the importance of this. And I think that the Food Transformation Cell will provide significant benefit in terms of assisting us in coordinating our efforts here. That cell is going to be stood up in September, and then in October we'll submit a report to you on how we stood it up and the progress that's been made to date. So it's a work in progress, but September is the date when that cell will start.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Kilmer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And